Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and thank you for joining today's Ternary webinar. Our topic today is Boost Your FinOps Success for Microsoft Azure in just 5 steps. My name is Marie Burke. I'm Director of Product Marketing at Ternary. I joined the company at the end of January, and I've been in the FinOps space for over 7 years. Always on the vendor side of the house, but in that time, I've had a lot of experience working with practitioners and partners. And I've spent a fair amount of time working on Microsoft Azure as well. So really looking forward to today's session. With that, I'd like to kick things over to my co-host here, Hayden, to introduce himself.
Hey everybody, my name is Hayden Singh. I'm a senior solutions engineer here at Ternary. Been in the FinOps space for about 7 years now. I've been at Ternary specifically for about 2.5 years. And I come from a lot of the pre-sales side of the house and working with potential customers to kind of build out their solutions and help walk them through their FinOps journey. So I'll be giving the demo today. I'm super excited to be here.
Thanks, Hayden. All right, let's dive in. So I like to start with some level setting here. Traditionally, a lot of different organizations and practitioners and people in the space like to use the terms cost management, FinOps, cloud financial management, cloud spend management interchangeably. But as part of our philosophy, we really see them being two distinct practices. And so if we think back to, generation one of cost management and solutions that were developed 10 plus years ago, it was a response to, increases in cloud spend. Cloud adoption was really growing significantly. Amazon was first to market, followed by Microsoft and Google respectively. And a lot of organizations thought, hey, let's move to the cloud. It's going to be cheaper. And inevitably, a lot of folks realize, maybe that's not the case. And, your migration strategy really plays a big factor into that cost effectiveness once you get into the cloud. Did we just lift and shift it? Did we do any refactoring or re-architecting prior to the migration? And so many companies started focusing on a reduction in cloud spend. And in some cases, cost management almost became synonymous with cost savings and reducing spend and tracking your budgets. And that's all well and good. And everyone still cares about those things. But what we've really seen is FinOps come into play right around the time of the pandemic and kind of flipped the whole notion on its head. So whereas cost management may have been more of a siloed and reactive approach, perhaps you overshot your budget and your management team came down with a slap on the wrist or a mandate to go fix that or find some money elsewhere. FinOps is being more proactive and forward thinking, and how can we maximize the value of the spend? And while yes, optimization and savings is part of the FinOps lifecycle, it's not the only focus of FinOps. And really focusing on that comprehensive strategy, multiple stakeholders and personas across the company. And that's where Ternary comes into play. So we are a purpose-built platform for FinOps. A key distinction between us and some of the tools that have been around in the space for a long time is that we live and breathe FinOps as part of our DNA, and we are investing in new capabilities and technologies to help you move into the future. So I realize some folks on the call may be familiar with Ternary. Some of you may have been maybe unfamiliar with Ternary and hearing of us for the first time. Thank you all for joining today's session. Just want to give a quick overview of Ternary and who we are. And so I like to start with our team. And I really do think people are a big differentiator for any company and organization. But what's unique about Ternary is that we are a team of FinOps practitioners and experts who've been in this space for a long time. And so you may see 100 years and think, oh, well, 100 years across a team isn't that many years. But for a company of our size, we are a startup, about 30 people. Many of us have been in this space for 5+ years. And so that really brings up our average and our count over 100 years. But why this matters is because we've built these platforms before, we've used them as practitioners before, and we have a lot of lessons learned and experiences that we've gleaned from that time. And we're using all of that to inform our platform now with Ternary and build for the use cases and challenges that practitioners and partners have in this current market. We have been noted for an exceptional ability to scale, and so that's something we definitely take a lot of pride in. Whereas some of the solutions in the market built 10 years ago, the architecture has not necessarily been maintained. We do take pride in running on a scalable architecture with serverless as well. And moving on, we'd like to dive into FinOps and the cloud operating model. So some of you may be very familiar with FinOps. Perhaps you are part of the FinOps community. Some of you may still be in the early days of your FinOps journey and just learning about it. But you'll see different variations of a graphic like this throughout some of the materials that the FinOps Foundation provides, as well as other solutions in this space. And so today we're going to walk you through the three phases of FinOps, starting with inform, and really a focus here on understanding who's spending money in the cloud, what they're spending it on, how you can allocate and appropriately charge back to different teams. We'll also dive into optimization. So again, going back to some of my earlier commentary regarding cost savings and utilization, of course, we all want to improve efficiency and get some savings benefits, but that's just one piece of the puzzle here, and it's not the whole FinOps practice. And then we'll also move on to the operate phase. And so really managing the practice effectively, doing some continuous improvement efforts, perhaps taking into account workflows for taking action, alerting, things of that nature. And so the recipe for success, people, process, and technology. And this may look a little different if you are a partner or managed service provider versus, a direct customer or practitioner. But starting with people, if you are a company that is perhaps an enterprise, you may have the ability to build out a centralized FinOps team. And so would highly encourage you to pull in stakeholders from different departments, depending on, where you sit within the organization. Perhaps you report into a CIO or a CTO. Perhaps you may even report into a CFO. Finance is definitely becoming a more prominent role in a FinOps practice as well. But if you have the ability to build out a centralized FinOps team early on and get buy-in from different stakeholders and groups, that will really help your practice as you move forward. So areas like allocation and forecasting, if you're in operations or engineering, bring finance into the fold, have those conversations early. Don't wait for, your quarterly or annual planning cycles to loop finance in and then have to explain, why your cloud spend, exceeded your budget, or why your forecast for the next year is double what you're currently spending. And if you're on the partner side of the house, you are the people, you can build a team at your company that augments the teams of the practitioners that you're working with. And so a lot of different opportunities here, depending on what approach you're taking to the market. And then from a process standpoint, again, would highly encourage folks to visit the FinOps Foundation website at finops.org to understand the FinOps framework a bit better. I think there's over 27 different capabilities now. And so there's a lot of different opportunity and areas for folks to hone in on their FinOps practice. And so as a practitioner, you may, implement some of these capabilities directly. You may work with various tools. And as a partner, you can build services around some of these FinOps framework capabilities and key principles. Lastly is the technology piece. And so for many folks, this comes in the form of a FinOps certified platform. Ternary is an example of that kind of platform. We've also seen the evolution of, cost management tools, cloud provider native consoles, native tools, as well as DIY approaches. And, we do support building on top of Ternary as well via our APIs and our integrations. But let's talk about Microsoft Azure for a minute, because that's why we're all here today. Microsoft Azure is interesting because, there really hasn't been a solution in the market that, draws a line in the sand and says, we are number one for Microsoft Azure. Cloudin was acquired by Microsoft back in 2017. And even at that time, that was a multi-cloud product. And so for many of you, you may had to experience using, Microsoft Cost Management, the native tool set. Perhaps you're using some elements of, a Power BI or Tableau as well in your reporting. Or perhaps you're using some of the existing solutions in the market. And, what we've seen and what we've experienced is most of the solutions in the market are built with AWS in mind. They're Amazon primary, Amazon first, and it shows as they, release new functionality throughout their development cycles and in their prioritization for their roadmaps. And the really important part at Ternary is, we are not an Amazon primary shop here. We do, of course, support Amazon because we are multi-cloud, but we started with Google, and that was a key factor in our company's strategy is we wanted to hone in and support customers and partners in areas where we felt there was a clear gap in the market. So starting with Google, and we're also, very strong in Azure as well. We want to lead the market in these two areas, in addition to supporting Amazon Web Services. But of course, with Azure, there are needs that companies have that they have not been able to meet with some of the existing tools in the market. And Microsoft has gotten more advanced over time in terms of the services and capabilities being offered. Now offering savings plans in the past few years, reservations. There's also, Microsoft specific agreements that users can take advantage of as well, Microsoft customer agreements, hybrid use benefits, and the like. And so it's really important to utilize a platform that understands your needs as a Microsoft customer and partner. And that's what we want to be for you at Ternary. So Azure is not an afterthought. Google's not an afterthought if you're multi-cloud. And of course, we still support Amazon as well. We pride ourselves on having feature parity across all three clouds. So if you are a multi-cloud user or multi-cloud partner, it's definitely an opportunity for you to work with us. So, our 5-step guide to success, why we're here today. Hayden's going to kick us off with establishing cloud cost transparency. So, again, tying back to the inform phase of the FinOps lifecycle, he'll go over different dashboarding reporting capabilities for both partners as well as customers. Next, tying your cloud investment back to business KPIs. This is really aligned with unit economics as part of a key capability within the FinOps framework. So Hayden's going to dive into how Ternary helps you with your unit economics approach. 3, eliminating infrastructure waste. So if you may have seen the State of FinOps report for 2024, you'll notice that reducing spend, reducing waste, and optimizing are the top priorities for many companies this year. And so we'll start with eliminating infrastructure waste, how we do that with rightsizing and some of the different engines we have available, and then tie that into cost savings opportunities as well. So going back to those commitment-based discounts, whether you have, reservations or savings plans, we can help you manage those throughout their life cycle as well. And then we're going to wrap things up with getting engineers to take action. And so if you are an engineer on this call, please don't take offense to that. This has been something that's been a key priority on the State of FinOps report for quite some time now. But really, again, going back to, the key principles of FinOps, everyone taking ownership for their spend and usage. And then, it's one thing to have all these reporting capabilities, but if you're not going to take action or glean any actionable insights from them, then, what's the point? And so with Ternary, we have workflows in place. We refer to this as case management to help facilitate that action and increase that collaboration across teams. And so with that, I'm going to hand things over to Hayden so he can dive into the demo.
Awesome. Now, as Marie had mentioned, as we're walking through the platform today, we're going to be touching on those different phases of FinOps. So we're going to be looking at the inform phase where we're giving the visibility into what your teams are spending and why. And that's where we're actually going to start this demo today. As we kind of push forward, we're going to be hitting that optimize phase where we're going to be making those right-sizing recommendations and the commitment planning. And then finally, that operational aspect where we're helping to drive a standard of accountability across the team. So in the inform phase, this is going to be where we're hitting the step 1, where we're establishing that cloud cost transparency. And this is going to be starting in our MSP dashboard and our MSP functionality here. So as an MSP, the first thing that we can do is ingest all of your different customers that you're currently working with today. And we're able to understand exactly the health of those customers as well. So we can start to see, day over day, month over month, how well are they doing? How much are they spending? Different types of things like the alerts that that are going to be start populating from their anomalies, any potential savings, and then the actual health of their cloud connection within your platform. So this is just understanding all of our different customers that we have in Ternary's MSP function. So these are the user costs, the build cost, our list cost, and then even monthly trends down below. So we can see that the delta between the main Ternary account here is around $23,000 or around 37% month over month in terms of changes. Now, when we continue to look through some of these different tenants, we can actually change out the breakdown by different billing accounts, maybe the provider, the region, even the services that are being consumed by your different customers there. As we look at the MSP dashboard, we'll be able to take a look at some of the anomaly alerts. So if there's any anomalies that are being triggered within any of your customers' accounts, we'll actually start to show that. You can see the main Ternary account has a ton of different anomalies. We have about $210,000 worth of anomalies that we should probably go investigate and figure out exactly what's going on. And we have that capability. If you actually just click into any of the tenants, you'll jump straight to that specific anomaly, into that specific tenant, and then you'll actually be able to understand, hey, why did this shoot up? And you'll be able to we'll walk through exactly how those work as we get a little bit later into the demo. The next thing that we're going to be touching on is the savings. And this is going to be showing us all the different savings opportunities by doing things like right sizing. So looking at things like Azure VMs, Azure SQL, Azure Blob, and then different rate optimizations. So this is going to be looking at those different savings plans or RI purchases and seeing where we could potentially cut back and have some larger amounts of those savings. So we can see in our demo, we have about $102,000 worth of potential savings that are available today. Finally, the last one I'll touch on is the clouds. And this is just understanding the health of your current customers. So we can see in our customer success tenant here, our Azure test account, we just pulled in data about 2 hours ago, which is at the mercy of the Azure cloud provider, right? So once Microsoft is making those updates, we're going to be pulling that data in, and you'll see that reflective in the platform. Now, on the flip side of that, I can actually see in my demo Azure account about 10 months ago was the last data refresh here. So this is letting me know that there's probably something broken with that connection that we're going to need to go jump into and figure out exactly what's going on and how we can make some potential changes there or update that specific account to figure out why we're not pulling in the actual data there. So regardless of if you are an MSP or if you are purchasing Ternary directly, the very first thing you're going to land on is the default dashboard here. Now, this default dashboard can be fully customizable to what's relevant to the individual coming into the platform. It doesn't necessarily have to be what you're seeing on this screen, but this is what's going to be populated the second you start to upload any cloud data into Ternary. And so with that being said, we're able to take any of these widgets and manipulate them to whoever and is coming into this platform, whether they have a finance perspective, whether they're an engineer, whether they're part of the DevOps team. This can be fully customizable to what's relevant to you. And with these specific types of dashboards, we have the capability of applying a scope view over top of this platform. Now, this is effectively going to be a global filter that you can apply here that is going to slice out a specific data point that you may be particularly interested in. As we're focusing on Azure today, I've actually built out an Azure cloud provider scope view. So once I apply this, we're going to see our costs be only related to the Azure cloud provider here. So it's about $603,000 across the entire platform that we see with respect to Azure. And so now all of these different widgets have been updated to be reflective of our Azure spend. And now we can follow along as we go through the rest of the platform, understanding where all those costs are. Now, this can be built off of anything coming in that specific billing file. So maybe we want to build it off a tag that you're leveraging today, or maybe a specific environment that you folks are leveraging, or an application. And we can build out all of these different types of scoped views for you, or you can work to build those out and create them on the fly as it pertains to what's relevant to that individual. So when we continue to look through here, this is going to be understanding, hey, this is my custom Azure dashboard that I've already built out. So this is going to be showing me things like my month-to-date Azure costs, my year-to-date Azure costs. Here's one of those applications that I've already built out here to show me what my budget would look like. And if we were to exceed that budget, I'd be able to be alerted and kind of understand and drill in, figure out, hey, why did we exceed that budget? So this is a 70% threshold along with a 100% threshold as we continue to go throughout the rest of the month. A couple of other widgets here are things like my application cost by environment. So this is another tag that we mapped into the platform that allows me to track my different environment costs, or even looking at gross costs by those Azure accounts. Finally, looking at things like your categories of spend for Azure. So we know that our largest spend is probably around compute, with the next largest being in storage there. And then we can see the following categories that come along that aren't quite as large, but that are still driving up our costs there. And then being able to follow along with those fastest growing services that we're consuming in Azure as well. Here's another daily trends for that specific budget that we had created earlier, so we can see, where do we stack up in historical months or previous months, and how much were we spending, and we can see that month over month we're increasing in our spend with Azure, which is a good sign. It means that we have healthy growth, and that our cloud spend is growing as it is with the business there. Now, you might be asking, how are we getting to those application costs by those specific environments, or how do we understand that what the Endeavor application is? And that's by looking at your current tags that you're pulling in directly from the cloud billing files. So these are all custom labels or custom tags that we've created based off of a construct from the billing file. And so this is looking at the different subscriptions in Azure and saying, hey, we know that this specific subscription is tied to the Endeavor application, or is tied to this specific team leader, so Marcelo or even John O'Connor here. So we can create these custom labels, which is an arbitrary key value pair that can now then be populated throughout the rest of the platform, and we can use to create either different scoped views, or we can create different dashboards or reports, all based off of these new custom labels that aren't written back to the cloud provider, but are now populating throughout all of Ternary here. Now, this is where we're going to go into step 2, where we're tying your cloud investment back to your business KPIs. And this is going to be looking at our unit economics. Now, looking at that Endeavor application that we had just built out that custom label for, we can see the cost of that Endeavor application here. And we can see things like the units of output from that Endeavor application for a KPI here. We can track that budget as we saw in our last dashboard, and even understand the weekly cost per unit and the daily cost per unit for that Endeavor application. And the next question might be, hey, how are you able to pull in these unit economics, and how can we look at some of these unit economics? And so let's click into one of these different widgets. Now, any widget you've seen already here can be drilled into just by clicking into the name of those widgets, which will take you directly to the report that actually these widgets are derived from. So in this particular scenario, I'm clicking into the units of output widget here, and this is going to be looking at our unit econ tab here. So this is going to say, hey, let's take a look at the custom metrics. And to create a unit economics metric here within Ternary, you would create a unit reporting metric here. And we can pull in data from any CSVs that your company might be using, or if you folks are leveraging Datadog, we can pull in the data from Datadog as well. You would upload that CSV, and then you'd start to define some of those columns for us here. And this is where we can understand those different licensed users to be able to pull in some of those metrics here that you'll see from that units produced. So now that we see that, we can take those units produced and say, hey, we produced about 106,000 units just yesterday when we look at the Endeavor application. Now, that cost per unit is built on the same metric, right? So we know that it's about 18 cents a day, or over the last 7 days, when we look at that actual unit of output there. And then by hovering over some of these graphs, we can see exactly what that cost looks like, and then you can click into any of these graphs as well, which would allow you to drill in even further if you had any questions that are kind of related to those. Now, the next phase we're going to be touching on is the optimize phase. So this is where we're going to be looking at things like the right sizing recommendations, or even some of the commitment planning that goes into the FinOps lifecycle. So this is where we're going to be starting to look at how we can eliminate infrastructure waste. And this is going to be we do this in a couple of different ways when we talk about right sizing here. So we can do this for Azure virtual machines. We can do this for Azure SQL, and then we can also do this for blob storage as well. So this is going to be showing me my last month total spend, my monthly spend to date, and any of our forecasted spend that we see over the coming month. Now, there's a couple of different ways we can aggregate the cost. This is going to be things by project ID or your subscription ID, your location, your family, your category. And then when we look at the usage, we're pulling in your CPU, your memory, your network, and disk. And by pulling in some of those metrics, we can see the different families that are being consumed today and the different instances that are tied to those families. So if we look at the instance count, we can actually see all of the instances that roll up to that standard FSD2 family, and we can see all the usage metrics that are tied to those specific instances there. And with those specific instances, what we're able to do is we can make those recommendations for different optimizations. And this is where you'll see the different recommendation types down below. So you can see we have about $74,000 worth of recommendations. And a couple of examples of these recommendations are things like our unattached storage or using ephemeral operating system disks if your workloads are stateless. Maybe there is a right size of virtual machine scale set. So if I actually click into here, what we can do is say, hey, we should probably right size or shut down an underutilized virtual machine scale set here. And it looks like we're making the recommendation to shut this one down. And our savings amount would be about $133 over the course of that time period there. And there's a couple of different things that I'll call out here down below. So we can actually do a change status. So these are all new recommendations that have came in. However, this could be something that was accepted or it was as designed, or maybe we implemented this change and we're waiting for this to update within the platform, or maybe this was inaccurate and we actually created this and we know that it's underutilized, but it's a situation where we're going to come back and leverage this, or we have it as a backup storage. So maybe we want to keep that around there. And anytime you make any of these changes here, then you can start to filter by those different statuses. As you can see right here, there's that filter by status at the top. But the last thing to call out is the fact that we can snooze these recommendations here so that, maybe you don't want to see this right away. Maybe this is something we need to revisit in a week or two. Then I can actually snooze this and come back to it. And one last call out actually is around the ability to create a case. And this is going to tie back into our case management workflow, which is in the operational phase. So I'll touch on this in a little bit later as we go into our anomalies, but just keep this in mind as we push forward. So this is just one of the different services, as I mentioned, that we're able to make right sizing recommendations. Again, we can do this for Azure virtual machines, Azure SQL, and then Azure blob storage. And then down below is where you can start to filter down based on kind of what's relevant to what you want to right size and optimize there. So whether you want to filter by a specific tag, whether we want to filter by an open or any closed recommendations, or any of those specific statuses, you have that option there, and you can make those different choices there. And one thing I'll call out is that anything that we've seen so far is fully exportable. So you can export any of this data into a CSV format. So that way you can drill into it if you'd like, or have that as a record in a future sense. Now we're going to be touching on to step 4 here, which is identifying cost savings opportunities. And this is going to be looking at our commitment planner here. So this is going to be in our Azure commitments, and these are the different commitment discounts that are available. So right off the bat, we're going to be pulling in your inventory and understanding, hey, what are we actually using today? So we have about 2 savings plans in the Ternary account here, and we can see what are the total cost along with the average utilization. So you can see that we're fairly good about making sure we get 100% utilization. We're about 0.1% off from that total number. We haven't quite gotten all the way to 100, but we're relatively close. So this is going to be able to show us, hey, what's our on-demand cost versus our actual RIs or savings plans that we're consuming. And then we can make recommendations based on some of those, on some of your historical utilization data there. So we're looking at the last 30 days here. And when I start to look at the different recommendations that are available, this is going to be done by a few different services. So whether it's an app service, Block Blob, Cache for Redis, MySQL, PostgreSQL, or virtual machines, and then whether we want to look at an RI or savings plan commitment versus the 1 year and 3 year commitments that we can start to drill into. So by looking at a 3 year, we can see what our monthly average savings would be, and then our estimated total savings over that 3 years, and then the estimated savings percentage being around 58% there, along with the total RI cost. Now, looking down below, we can see what our coverage details are. We can see what our compute usage. And as I start to click into some of these recommendations and add them to the graph, you'll actually see the green bar start to hover and show us where some of those recommendations are being tied and our estimated coverage that would be tied in with it from there. So if I were to go in with specific virtual machines and a MySQL coverage type, we can get to about a 25% coverage rate just by leveraging those three different RIs. And then if I added in the other three down below, we're getting to about probably, I'd say 65% of my total compute usage would be covered here, which then gives us a little bit of a better rate and allows us to capitalize on a lot of those savings opportunities moving forward. Now, the final step we're going to be touching on here is where we actually blend in and we go into the operational phase. So this is where you can hold some of those individuals accountable. And by doing so, this is going to be the step 5 of creating a workflow for engineers to take action. And this is where we go into our anomaly detection here, which is automatically going to be running in the background. So we're going to be using machine learning to take a look at your historical billing data and understand, hey, how have we been operating over the past several months? And are there any, glaring changes that we've seen that we want to alert you on based on that historical spending pattern? Now, if there is a specific alert rule that you'd like to create, you can tune this a bit. So if you want to say, hey, we know that we want to make sure and keep track of a certain subscription or a specific account or even a specific environment. I want to track that over time and say, hey, if we were to exceed 10% of $1,000 in that specific account or in that specific service, I want to be alerted from that, right? So I can subscribe to this here and be alerted as any of those changes happen, or if those any anomalies shoot up, then I'll actually be alerted and I can go drill into it myself. Now, if I go back into the alert tracking here, one of the first examples we'll take a look at, or the top example here is going to be a network spike that we actually had back in October. And so the expected range was about $550 to about $570, but the actual delta was about $1,000, with it shooting up to about $1,600 total. So I can go investigate this if I wanted. If I click into the investigate tab, this actually takes me to a report that's already built out here that is showing me exactly that specific time in place where we had that spike in spend. And if we go to October 7th, you can actually see that $1,600 spike here from the historical patterns that weren't too spiky, so to speak. And if you want to continue to drill into any of this data, you can add in additional groupings or additional filters to be able to actually figure out exactly what's going on with that specific anomaly. Now, last thing I'll call out here is on this specific page or and across the platform, we have the ability to create a case management workflow. So this is where we can create that workflow for engineers, and we can hold those individuals accountable and able to follow along throughout the life cycle of this anomaly. So I can click this case management button up top. I can select this specific case or this specific anomaly and say, hey, this is a situation where there's an anomaly in the customer portal. Can we take a look into the spike in the network charge? I can actually assign this to an individual, and then I can follow this case. So if there's any changes that are made within Ternary's platform, or if there's any changes that are made, I'll be able to see that and I'll be alerted as such. The last thing to say is that we can link this to Jira. So if you folks are leveraging Jira's cloud, this is a bi-directional workflow that syncs up with Jira and within Ternary. So any changes made in Jira will actually reflect in Ternary and vice versa. So this way you can send this along, it'll create the ticket, and then you can have an engineer go and action on this without ever actually having to necessarily log into the platform. The final thing is I'll actually show you what this case would look like. So by clicking into cases here, we can actually go into that specific anomaly in the customer portal. And when we drill into this, this was a first pass drill down. So we knew it was a measured data transfer out. And as we started to investigate, we actually realized it was an engineering project that was managed by the John O'Connor team. And when we spoke with them, we realized that they were onboarding a new large customer with a lot of historical data to ingest. And so because of that, we had that large data transfer out. And then when we went and revisited, we thought maybe it was just a one-time thing. But once we revisited it a few months later, we actually realized that we had another large spike in spend, but it was something that it was a planned growth expectation. So it's something we're going to want to monitor and keep track of over time. And then if I wanted to add a comment here, if I submitted this, both myself and Mike McDowell, we would both be alerted with any of those changes that were made, and we'd be able to drill into it and kind of figure out exactly what's going on. So this was my demo of the Azure capabilities within Ternary's platform. I appreciate everybody for tuning in here. I'm going to pass the mic back to Marie here and open the floor up for any questions.
Let's tie off on some of the key takeaways for today's session. First and foremost, Ternary is a modern FinOps solution for both MSPs and enterprises. One thing you may have noticed as Hayden was going through the platform is that it is multi-cloud by default. So some other solutions in the space may require you to switch modules or switch navigation tabs by cloud vendor. That is not the case with Ternary. So you can leverage those scoped views to hone in on a specific cloud, or as Hayden demonstrated, you can build a custom dashboard by a cloud or whatever view you're looking to achieve. We are also easy to use for technical and business personas. So as part of, key FinOps principles and philosophy, we are usable by finance teams, FinOps teams, engineering teams, as well as executive leadership. So if you need to subscribe reports or dashboards out to your leadership teams or to anyone in your organization, you are able to do that very easily with Ternary. We are able to optimize cost and usage across all three leading clouds, and this is feature parity. Not many platforms can make that claim. And so Hayden demonstrated some of the compute use cases, but as he mentioned, there's also compute, database, we have Kubernetes for all three clouds. So we're very proud of this new support. Most recently, Hayden just touched on ternary case management. We do believe this is a really strong differentiator in the market, especially because we have a bidirectional integration with Jira. So if you want to link that anomaly, that networking charge that Hayden showed to a Jira ticket, you can work on the console that is most comfortable for you. So the engineer may prefer to work out of Jira, whereas perhaps the FinOps practitioner noticed it in the platform of choice, and they can communicate back and forth in that mechanism. And lastly, all of this comes at a fixed price with no overages. From our experience in the market, we know a lot of folks are not fond of the percentage of cloud spend pricing model. And so we do have an alternative to that. So we do offer fixed pricing. We also have, different pricing arrangements if you are direct or if you are a partner as well. So definitely open to working with you and your business on that. And with that, we want to thank you so much for your time today, and we'll pop over to the chat here and take a look at some of the questions.